We will continue our review of the next disaster-related statistical framework tables, and then this time Mr. Tirapong will ask the countries who can do this voluntarily, and that would be today's meeting. So without any further delay, I would like to start our today's meeting. And I'm pleased to invite Mr. Tirapong again from our ESCAP Secretariat to present rationale, data, and the methodological considerations of disaster-related statistical framework, Table A and B1a. Mr. Tirapong, over to you. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep the time. So let me share the screen. I hope you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Right, thank you. So let me just lower this up. Okay, right. Thank you very much. And as Aruna said, that we Nepal and Thailand kindly volunteer to have a closer look at the first two tables in the DRSF. And what I'm going to do is just to briefly present the tables to everyone so that we are on the same page on what is actually proposed in the tables and what are some of the questions that we might want to keep in our mind for the discussion after we heard from Nepal and Thailand. So the first table in the DRSF really aims to capture the very basic information about disasters, so the number of events, so how frequent we are impacted by various type of disasters. If you look at the row, different type of disasters are classified into different types. Those that are originated from geophysical causes or hydrological, methodological, or climate induced, biological disaster, and other types. Then in the columns, we would like to, because it is very relevant that we also know that disasters are spatial, right? They impact different part of our country and maybe differently. So it might be of interest for disaster response team and also for the decision makers to understand which part of their countries that got impacted by different types of disaster. The column really to capture the spatial spread of the occurrence that happen in the country. And you would see the light gray shaded column that reads the adjustment for multiple counting of events by region or states. That came out due to the fact that we know that one disaster could potentially impact more than one region or more than one administrative areas, depending on how data would be reporting. For instance, if data are collected from bottom up, meaning that the collection is actually happening on the ground at the provincial basis, then aggregate up to the national database. And if there is one disaster that impacts two or more provinces, it could be the case that in terms of the reporting, province A also report that there is one disaster happened. Province B may also report that there's one disaster happened in their area, which happened to be the same disaster. It just cover more than one administrative region. When we aggregate up to the national level, if it's a simple summation, then we are going to have two events recorded in the national database. So this column really want to make sure that we don't double count or triple count, depending on how many areas this really impact people in that particular event. So for example, if there are one disaster, if there's a disaster that impact 3 provinces, in different region, they might record one event in region 1, region 2, and region 3. But then we have the adjustment that would be -2, so that the national total on the last column would have only one event. This would be a statistical approach to avoid avoiding double counting. It also depends if the country have a system to assign a unique identifier or numbers to different disasters, then this issue might not come up. This really depends on how data are organized and treated in different countries. And if we look at the sub column under each column, it's also relevant to understand that different disasters have their different scales, right? Some disasters might be in a very local scale that impact a small area in a region or in a province. Some may be big, medium, some may be very large. And the scale of these disasters are important in terms of the disaster planning, budget planning for risk reduction and response. So it's quite important to be able to classify types of disaster by the scale. Again, this is to see how the statistics could be more relevant to disaster planning. Of course, we have to see how that would come up in terms of the current practices. So when we work on table A1, there might be some questions that we might ask ourselves in terms of counting the disasters. For instance, if we have hazardous events that might happen all the time, but when exactly the hazardous event would turn into a disaster, what would be the criteria? And how do we define beginning and ending of a disaster? Some disasters are very easy to identify when they actually start and when it's actually stop. Some are more difficult. And see if countries have current practices in treating possible double counting that we just discussed in terms of the number of events that might impact more than one administrative region. And in terms of classifying disaster types, are there existing national or international classifications and definitions that countries are currently use so that data are going to be consistent across time and space. We also want to understand if and how different scale of disaster are being reported or recorded in different country context. For table B1 A, that would be a record of from disaster agency perspective. These are the baseline information, and the tables are a template that country can add more information that will be relevant to the countries or remove some that might be less relevant to the country. But for instance, in the proposed, let's say in the template, let's say we have the number of population classified by age, because children and people and elderly might need more attention when it comes to disaster response and rescue. We also have number of households, median disposable income. We also want to record the GDP in different region of the country. And this part, very likely the data might come from the NSOs as a background information that could be useful both before the disaster happens or in the peacetime when we want to do proper planning for disaster risk management. The second half of this table talks about population in hazard area. So this one, we basically need at least two sets of information. One is population by location. It can be province, it can be smaller as administrative area, and also an understanding of risks of different hazards that might happen. If we have these two information and then we can overlay in, let's say, in the GIS platform, then we would be able to get an idea of different number of people who might be exposed to flood or forest fire or different type of disaster of priority in different countries. And this is important in terms of disaster planning as well. So some of the questions that we might want to keep in mind is exactly where the data source might come from in terms of the population, household, and income statistics. And it can be more. It can be number of hospitals, basic critical infrastructures in the country where they are and where the data source could be coming from. Another set of information would be the disaster risk maps. Some countries might call them exposure map, hazard map, or disaster map. That we want to really understand it by different types of disaster. And if you do have those maps, how would you define the cutoffs? Whether it is high exposure, medium exposure, low exposure, or no exposure to different types of the hazards. So these are basic questions and maybe the intent of the first two tables of DRSF. And I think we are going to hear more from Nepal and Thailand as they have done some initial consultation with their disaster agencies counterpart. Thank you very much, Irina, and over to you.
Thank you, Thiraphong, for a very comprehensive explanation about this tables, and then hopefully we will hear more information from the country's presentation from Nepal and Thailand. And then thankfully, Mr. Sushil, as I see, he already joined us, so yeah, we can hear from him very soon. So thank you, Thiraphong, again. So with your permission, I would like to move to our next session, and I would like to invite Mr. Syed Ibrahim bin Moh Jamaluddin, Statistician, Agriculture and Environment Statistics Division, Department of Statistics of Malaysia, to moderate the session that aims to present the initial results of the review of disaster-related statistical framework. So Mr. Syed Ibrahim bin Moh Jamaluddin, floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable TGW Chair, Madam Aruna, Mr. Thiraphong, and very good afternoon to everyone. Firstly, I would like to extend our gratitude to ESCAP for giving us the opportunity to participate in the 19th session of this technical working group. Before we proceed to the presentation, let me brief the session agenda. This session allocated 1 hour. Each presenter will have 20 minutes presentation and followed by 20-minute discussion session at the end of the second presentation. Please reserve your question, thought, or advice. The question can be related to the presentation or regarding of some issue related to disaster-related statistic framework manual, because our colleague from ESCAP is here to help us out. This presentation is about initial result of the review of DRSF table A1 and B1a by presenter from Nepal and Thailand. And now, without further ado, I would like to call Mr. Sushil Kumar Sharma. He is the Director of Environment Statistics Section from Central Bureau of Statistics, Nepal. Mr. Sushil, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Respected chair, all the participants. This is first of all, thank you for this ESCAP giving this opportunity to share what we have done in Nepal. I am Sushil Kumar Sharma, Director of the Central Bureau of Statistics. Now our office name has changed. Now our office names becomes the National Statistics Office. After 56 years, we got the new act, New Statistics Act in Nepal. And before we are under the National Planning Commission. Now we are directly under from the Prime Minister's office. We are directly under the Prime Minister's office due to this act. And our bureau or our National Statistics Office, now it is led by the secretary. Now, first of all, Director General, it is in the first class in our in our public service category. Now the bureau is led by the secretary. That is from our new act. Okay, next slide, please. So according to our act, in the disaster is defined. It means the causing or threatening situation in any place that results in loss of lives and properties and makes severe impacts on the livelihood and the environment. It means the disaster is defined in our Disaster Reduction Act. The disaster is defined in this way. And the disaster is divided into two parts, non-natural and the natural disaster. Next slide, please. Yeah, non-natural disasters means epidemic, famine, wildfire, insect or anthrax attack, animal and bird flu, pandemic flu, snake bite, animal attack, mine, aviation, road, water or industry-related accident, fire, toxic gas, chemical or the radiation leakage, gas explosion, consumption of the toxic foods, environmental pollution, deforestation or damage to the physical infrastructure, and accidents in time of disaster rescue or similar other disaster occurred from. These are the category of the non-natural disasters according to our act. So next slide, please. The natural disasters: snowfall, hailstone, avalanche, gulf, extreme rainfall, low rainfall, flood, landslide, soil erosion, inundation, storm, drought, cyclone, cold wave, heat wave, lightning, earthquake, volcanic eruption, wildfire or similar other disaster occurs in the natural disaster. These kinds of disaster may happen in Nepal because Nepal is one of the disaster prone country, and according to our act, this disaster is divided into the non-natural and the natural disaster. Next slide, please. Yeah, data compilation, data collection and the compilation. Basically, the disaster-related data collected by our security agency like Nepal Police, Nepal Army, Armed Police Force, Department of National Intelligence, and the similar the provincial place. They have the major role for the data collection. Similarly, we have the real-time hazard risk monitoring systems, such as we have the seismic station, hydrometeorological station, lightning detection centers. From there also we can collect the real data. It means in this way we collect data for the disaster-related activities. And to verify and to monitor, we have in Nepal now we have 3 tiers of the government, and central, provincial level and the local level. Between this local and the province, we have the district also, 77 districts in Nepal. So for this disaster management activity, we have the local disaster management activity, district disaster management activities, and the provincial disaster management activity. And in the central, we have the Ministry of the Home Affairs. Similarly, the NDRRMA, it means the National Disaster Reduction Authority. In this way, these kinds of structure we have to verify the data collected and to monitor all these activities. These kinds of disaster management committee in Nepal. Next slide, please. Yeah. Similarly, this death, injured and the economic losses is estimated by the data collection on the field, which is verified by different disaster management committee. Yes, death, injured, economic losses from the local level where the disaster happened. It is collected by their system. It means security agency or from the major role for the Ministry of the Home Affairs. The data collected and to verification. But death, injured people, dead people, and how much economic losses is there. These kinds of things we have to estimate, and it is verified by this disaster committee, that disaster management committee in the local level, district level, provincial level. These kinds of disaster management committee verify the data. And similarly, the government of Nepal is working on developing the level of understanding of disaster risks among all tiers of government, including the non-government and the private sector. Non-government and the private sectors are also working on this disaster risks. Basically, they focus on the disaster reduction activities, early warning system. They are supporting government. Because Nepal is one of the flood-prone country also, they have the early warning system. They develop these kinds of early warning system. For this government, one of the government's major stakeholders are the INGO, NGO, and the private sector also. Next slide. Yeah, just the Terapong shared us as the table A1, which is the summary table for the disaster occurrence by the hazard types, scales, and the geographic. And according to this classification, UNDRR classification, we have the data: geophysical, hydrological, meteorological, and the climatological, biological, other. We have these kinds of data according to our province wise. We have the 7 provinces, province 1, province 2. It means 7 provinces. We have this category data, but we do not have it not defined directly very large events, national scales, medium, local scales. It has not been distinguished according to their property. It means how much losses or how many people injured or how many people dead. According that we can verify, but actually in this way it is not distinguished, or it is not disaggregated. Only we can get this according to the UNDRR classification: geophysical, hydrological, meteorological, biological, and others. In this way, the data is available, and this data, the source of the data is the DRR portal of the government of Nepal, which is handled by the Ministry of the Home Affairs. Next slide, please. Yeah, for the population, this B1 table, population background statistics and hazard exposure, basically this data, the data source for this, I want to discuss with the data source for this table. Next slide, please. I'll discuss from that slide. Yeah, basically the data source is the population census. Just recently we conducted the population census within 2 months. Up to the end of the December, maybe December, up to December 15 or end of the December, we'll get the population census result. Total result of the population census we'll get. One of the data source for this table is the population census, and another source is the GDP estimation. And now the NSO, our office, is starting to estimate the disaster loss. How much losses due to the disaster in the GDP sector? That kind of activity is also going on. So we are also conducting Nepal Living Standard Survey. This is the field work is going on. Some of this data we can get from this Nepal Living Standard Survey also. And similarly, we can get some this economic and the non-economic losses, all this. Now we are also conducting National Climate Change Impact Survey. Second round of survey we are also conducting. There is the one area, the disaster losses. How much economic losses, how many people lost within the 5 years category we are taking in this in the survey. So this data also we can get from the, some of the data we can get from the National Climate Change Impact Survey also. And another source is the administrative data collected by the Ministry of Home Affairs and the other stakeholders. Similarly, Department of Hydrological and the Meteorology, other department also, EC mode, here the EC mode, all this from these kinds of stakeholders also we can get data. Now we cannot prepare this, that is P1 table, but maybe the data sources from this these activities, or from these data sources we can get the data for this table B1. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, this is our DRR portal. In this way, daily this is updated, our DRR portal, district, the municipality, what kind of incident, and when it was occurred, death, male, female, similarly missing, affected, estimated loss, government houses fully damaged, government house partially damaged. These kinds of portal we can see in our drrportal.gov.mp. From this website, we can get this. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. And the disaster and the basic status, this also I have to talk a little about. Disaster data in the last meeting also I shared this also. Disaster data in the population census 2021. It means I mentioned at that time in this census we developed the community questionnaire. In this community questionnaire, one of the thematic area was the disaster. And this community questionnaire we collected from these 7,643 wards, because the ward is the lowest administrative unit of Nepal. From these wards we can collect the data, and this data entry has been completed. Now within 1.5 months the data is available. So it includes like the condition like flood, landslide, soil erosion, inundation, thunderstorm, hailstorm, sporadic rain, heat wave, cold wave, drought, avalanche. These kinds of what the situation in that ward, that the lowest administrative unit of Nepal, in which area, what is the, it means what kind of disaster or like climate induced disaster or other kinds of disaster may happen in that area. And these kinds of data we are collecting from these wards. So how much losses of life and property in 1 year? In 1 year, how much losses there in the life, in the property? These kinds of data we are already collected from our community questionnaire, and this data also may help to fulfill this table. Similarly, what the environment section of CBS is doing on, it means we regularly publish the environment statistics, and we within the guideline of the UN framework for the development of environment statistics, there is one module, disaster statistics. Within that module, we produce the table and publish in our environment statistics section. Similarly, in the environment compendium is also one of the publication of our section, which is more analytical type of report. There is also we can the expert in this. It means for the disaster sector, we will take that kind of expert from the university or from other side, and they will prepare the analytical report, and we publish in our environment compendium. Next slide, please. Yeah. And the risk assessment, it means disaster risk maps, disaster exposure maps, hazard maps, disaster maps, etc. can be developed by using the community data from the population census. And so if we use by using of this the community data, we can produce these kinds of map. Similarly, in Nepal, climate-induced risks and the vulnerability maps. Now the climate-induced disaster risks and the vulnerability maps are produced by the Ministry of the Forest and the Environment. I'm going to share these maps, what they are preparing. Please, next slide. Yeah, this is the baseline risks of the climate. This is the 77 districts of Nepal. These kinds of map produced by the Ministry of the Forest and the Environment, which district is according to the risks of the climate change impact, which is very low impact, moderate impact, high impact, very high impact. These kinds of category is this kinds of disaggregated information we can get from this map. It is prepared by the Ministry of Forest and Environment. Similarly, next slide, please. Similar, this kinds of map also produced by the ministry. Vulnerability map. That was the impact. This is the vulnerability. How much the vulnerable the district? It means very low vulnerable, moderate vulnerable, high vulnerable, very high vulnerable. These are the mountain area of Nepal, middle, the hill part, and below the Tarai, it means the plain part. In this way, the vulnerability is counted in Nepal. Next slide, please. So the challenges. Challenges means uncertainty of risks due to climate, because Nepal is one of the climate induced disaster prone country. So many things may happen due to the climate change. And similarly, we have the lack investment in the preparedness and the early actions. It is better for we have to invest on the preparedness, but problem is to invest on the preparedness. And similarly, the knowledge gaps. It means in understanding the diverse risks due to limited scientific assessments, not too much research has been done in information technology and the knowledge on the practical aspects of the disaster risk management, reduction management, in proper allocation of the budgeting, planning, and execute activities related to the disaster risks, in linkage among the institution agencies involved in forecasting, managing, and assisting the risks and the responses, problem for the coordination, all these things, in bilateral international effort to tackle the transboundary nature of the hazards. So the hazard is generally the transboundary nature. So it may require the bilateral international efforts for the neighboring country. So these kinds of challenges we are facing. Next slide, please. So expectation. So expectation, better understanding of risks through research, survey, and assessment. It means we are also expecting support from the ESCAP for the data analysis of the data which we are getting now from the population census. We can do more work on the disaster related activities. So for this, we are expecting support, technical support from the ESCAP. And now we are also conducting National Climate Change Survey second round. Many information we can get from this survey also. And we have to improve the institutional arrangement and the structure, and the bilateral and the internal cooperation for knowledge and the technology. It is highly expected. Empowered leadership. Oh, that is also one of the challenge, or we have to empower leadership, the province and the local government. For the local level and the provincial level, they are not aware. It means we have to give more training, all these things, empowerment type of things we have to provide them. And similarly, we need the capacity development program. So these are the things we are expecting from our agencies, and from the ESCAP also we are expecting these things. And next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So first of all, highly apologize due to some technical problem. I mean, contact in the beginning due to some technical problem in the internet. So sorry for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sushil. It was on the dot, 20 minutes. Thank you. It was very informative presentation. And now let me introduce to our second presenter, Mr. Saratai Wachaparon. Please forgive me if I pronounce wrongly. He's the Director of Statistical Coordination Group from National Statistics Office, Thailand. Please welcome Mr. Saratai.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon for everyone. Can you hear me? That's okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thanks ESCAP, Mr. Thirapong and Ms. Piyapat for inviting me and my team to share our experience on DRSF table review. This year, NSO Thailand is prioritized the development of official statistics in line with the important and necessary national agendas to report to user demand for official statistics. This will support the formulation of policy, monitor and evaluate the country developments in terms of economic, social, and environment aspect. We have several subcommittees to define and prioritize topics and official statistics on the national resource and environment statistics. The subcommittee set 3 prioritized environment agendas related to the national strategies. One of that is disaster. But NSO Thailand is not familiar with environment statistics. We asked for the technical assistance from UN ESCAP. That's why we are engaged in the review of the DRSF. And we
sorry, cannot see the slide in your screen. Are you sharing the slide or ESCAP is sharing the slide?
I'm sharing the slide.
But we
I will
cannot.
share again.
Sorry, we didn't see the slide.
No. Hey.
Maybe we need to share the correct screen if you use different screen for the presentation.
หวานใช้วินโดว์มันไม่ขึ้นอ่ะก็เลยแชร์สกรีนแล้วอ่ะ
ลองเปิด
เห็นไหมถามเขาดิ
Now we see it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we see it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And we also working with the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigations. Today, I will talk about the table A1, B1a, and disaster in Thailand. Definitions and disaster types. Under the Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Act 2007, in the section 4, disaster is mean fire, storm, flood, drought, human epidemics, animal epidemics, aquatic animal epidemics, plant epidemics, include other hazards which affects the public, include by natural or human accident or any other event which is harmful to a life, a body of the people, or inflict a damage on a properties of the people or of a state, and shall as well as mean air threat and cyber threat. There are 2 types of official disaster declarations: the declaration of the areas where a disaster occurs and the declaration of the areas where emergency assistance is provided to disaster victims. There are 2 main disaster incident report in Thailand. One, in the event of disaster in the local area, relevant officials such as community leaders, village heads in the area will report through all channels immediately, such as line, telephones, and relevant agency will prepare reports, both formal documented and informal, such as the line group and the provincial disaster prevention and mitigation agency will compile a summary of the report, which consists of area, location, the incidents, date, time, cause, situation of the latest incident, damage, something asked for help, and the latest operations. Another, recording report data in the database system to collect overall statistics. The information stored in the system is the same with the disaster report from the local areas, such as area of accidents, date, time, cause of occurrence, assistance operation in each period. So the counting number of incidents at present in Thailand collected spatial statistics with the divided the boundary of the area according to Department of Provincial Administrations. The smallest unit that collected data is village or communities. The summation is usually based on the time interval, such as a day, a month, years, or more than a year. Next slide. Level of disaster in Thailand divided 4 levels. Small disaster to be announced by provincial governors. Medium disaster also to be announced by provincial governor. Large disaster to be announced by head of National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Committee. We have a committee for take care of the disaster if it happens. extremely serious disaster to be announced by the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister, and the level of the disaster can be more seriously trust. We have guidelines for decision making to enhance disaster management. The commander or director use criteria or condition to determine the level of disaster management according to the risk assessment of each area. Criteria consists of area where the disaster occur and damage, number of characteristics of the population in areas, difficulty, complicated situations, operational capability from available resources, and commander or director decisions. If said area is declared as a disaster area, or if the area is existent in the declarations, the disaster start date will be announced, and if the disaster lasts for a long time, disaster end date may be announced again. The disaster occurs separate in 3 stages. 1. The starting state begins when the disaster occurs. After the disaster, 2. After the disaster, this period is defined as the relief situations. And 3. The last stage. After the relief situation, related agency will take action to aid and rehabilitate. The report contains information about the area, location of the incident, the date and time, the cause of the incident, the circumstance of the recent incident, the damage, the need for assistance, and the latest assistance, including the announcement of the area of the incident and the announcement of the area that need help. Updating data, restore people, properties, and public goods, as well as restore people lifestyle. Thailand disaster statistic reporting is collected and reported at the smallest area levels, such as village communities. The statistic format is report in the village format, and the overview is summarized in the provincial level and regional overviews. The most frequent and severe physical damage disaster in Thailand is flood. The finding of the Section 4 of the Act, which is an overflow and accumulation of the expanse of water that submerges land. It is usually due to heavy rainfall. Events produce a large volume of water within a body of water such as river and canal, exceeding the total capacity of the bodies. And as a result, some of the water flows are set outside the normal perimeter of the bodies. In addition, human activities such as blocking the natural flow of the water, either intentionally or unintentionally, can produce flood, often causing significant facilitate and material and environmental damage. Flooding can be classified according their inherent characteristics. One, inundations, and 2, floods, flash floods. And about the slide is show table B1a. We use fundamental statistics from government agencies such as population data from the provincial administrative organization and the Department of Provincial Administrations. Household, we use the data from the Department of Provincial Administrations. Median household income and GDP from National Economic and Social Development Councils and National Statistical Office. The National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Plan has classified the level of risk in each type of disaster in 5 levels. 1, extremely high exposures. 2, high exposure. 3, moderate exposure. 4 low exposure, and 5 extremely low exposures. Each type of disaster. There are many agencies such as Geoinformation and Space Technology Development Agency or GISTA and Thai Meteorological Department that have made a preparation with the academic principle with the statistical analysis to make prepare the data for use the something for prepare when have a disaster. Each of the risk area has a reference the number of people living in that area with the Department of Local Administrative Data. Maybe that's all of my presentations because I work with the DDPM, but I'm not very clearly some term of the definition for disaster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saratrai, for sharing Thailand experience in compiling table A1 and B1a. Now the floor is open for the discussion. Please raise your hand and please state your name and your organization.
Moderator, would it be helpful if I pull back the questions again in case we would like to go through some of the questions.
Okay.
Okay, I can share my slide.
Right. Yeah, the earlier question. Yeah. Okay. Okay. This was the question that been collected by the ESCAP from the survey they done it earlier. Like on what criteria are hazardous event considered as disaster? How are the beginning and the end of disaster event defined? Are the current practice in treating possible double counting disaster event and impact more than one administrative area? I think some already explained by Therapong earlier. Maybe Therapong, can you explain a little bit detail? Maybe it will be good for everybody here, for the participant also.
Yes, I can do that. So let me see. Okay. I think we and thanks moderator and thanks again Nepal and Thailand. I think we heard a lot of basic building blocks, let's say from both countries. I think one thing that we might want to proceed in this discussion session is to hear from other countries in this call if they have different perspectives or practices in their own country. For instance, for the first two countries, in terms of defining what's a disaster, what is not disaster, or how to determine the beginning and the end of the disaster. From Nepal and Thailand, it seems that it would more or less follow the declaration or announcement by the authority. So if we could go around the room, if it is similar practices in other countries, maybe we can start from Mongolia. I will share. Is it the same? So things that we would think we would classify a disaster, would that follow like official announcements?
Thank you, Therapong, for this explanation and asking me to share our country experiences. So actually, I'm sure that our participants already got these questions and prepared for this discussion. And then regarding the criteria for this hazardous events considered as a disaster, actually, in our case, for Mongolia case, we have this government resolution for classifying the hazard events, and then they put these thresholds when the thresholds is already met, we could declare it as a disasters. So currently I'm having these documents, and then it says that we have like many hazard types, and then also we put some criteria for each hazard, and then we put like some duration, and then also the frequency, and then this scale. And then if all of this reaches beyond this, we declare it as a disaster. So we have a very clear classification on that. But we have some difficulties for identifying defining the beginning and then the end of disasters. But of course, for some events, hazardous events, we could clearly define when it started and then when it, we started this recovery things. But for some disasters, especially for the slow onset disasters, for us, it's really difficult to define the beginning and then ending of this things. Also, regarding the classifications, of course, we use our own classifications as indicated in this governmental resolution. Also, we use these international classifications because we have been cooperating with UNDRR, and then we already established this disaster database, like this inventory, known as a disinventar, and then also we have our own system on that. Yeah.
Thanks, Aruna. I also saw many colleagues from the Philippines. Maybe can we hear from the Philippines similar on the same question? Do you have the same practice? Is this by official declaration, or you have specific maybe numerical or numerical thresholds that you would announce events as disaster? So I'm not sure if Vivian or Virginia or Faith would like to open your microphone.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Very clearly, thanks.
Okay, so for in the case of the Philippines, we were part of the project, ESCAP project in the past, and we tried to look at assess the data on disaster statistics. So there were several findings that we had, which is also recurring until now. Number one is there are several agencies that are generating exactly the same data sets, but the results are like different. We saw that there are different ways of collecting this data. Say, for example, deaths during the disaster, missing persons during the disaster, and so on. These are examples. The Department of Health will report their own number of deaths, number of affected population, number of missing persons. The Department of Social Welfare also will report exactly the same data set but different figures. And also the Office of the Civil Defense, which is under the National Risk Reduction Management, they have also the same set of data but different data sets. So these are really the challenges, different reporting. And this one, we saw that the collection period is different, the definition of terms is different. When are you recording when the missing person is there, or how do you exactly recorded. Yeah. So this is in terms of the available data. And this is very dangerous. Dangerous because we have a lot of users in terms of the disaster indicators for the pre-disaster, during disaster, after disaster. So there is a need to really reconcile them. How to reconcile them? This is something that, of course, we need guidance from the ESCAP, TWG. So this is the first one. Second is, so far, when we saw the framework of the DRSF, Disaster Risk Reduction Statistical Framework, we saw that there are only 33% available data to really fill up or support the DRSF framework, even the Sendai framework, only 33% of them. There are we have tiering, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And we saw that those important indicators that we need to develop for the policymakers, for the users of disasters, are identified as tier 2 or tier 3. I'm not too sure whether moving forward, we can also look at these tiers 2 and 3 and really prioritize with our country sharing, no? We share each other, whether you have this data and Philippines has no data, and so on, no? And how to develop them. And that's the second. The third and maybe the last is disaster statistics is not really that so popular, no? Like the economic statistics, like the gross domestic product, poverty, and so on. So we need to do more advocacies. Advocacies in terms of how exactly do we use this data? How will the planners use this, the users, and so on? We have identified a lot of these policies, but trying to train the people, the users, how they will exactly use this. This is still a data gap for the Philippines. We are moving forward on this because we have the Disaster Steering Committee created under the National Disaster Risk Management Council. We have that. So step by step, we are moving towards that. And the Philippine Statistics Authority also, we have the Technical Working Group on Climate Change and Disaster Statistics. So we have that mechanism to really inform each other what are the gaps, how to popularize disaster statistics, and so on. So these are some of the things that we have encountered, but of course, we are moving towards updating. We started on the DRSF, meaning Disaster Risk Reduction Expenditure Accounts. And we are updating this on an annual basis. Data are not really that comprehensive, meaning these disaster expenditures are done by the establishments, by the household, private corporations. We have that from the establishment survey. But the disaster expenditure of the household, we do not have that data for the households. What we did, we have the community-based monitoring system, and this is like generating information at the community level. We put up additional question on the community-based monitoring system to include, this is a household-based survey, and we include a question, how much expenditure did you spend for the year, for the annual? And by December of this year, we will have the results, but these are only for pilot municipalities. So So far, these are some of the developments, initiative from the Philippine Statistics Authority. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Terafong. Thank you po.
And thanks, Vivian, and very nice to see you again. So maybe with the permission of the moderator, we have a poll, so that we perhaps we can move to the next question on the possible double counting. And I also see Shasna from in case other colleagues would like to raise their hand now. I see Shasna from the Maldives on the call as well. So Shasna, do you encounter any issues or possible issues of double counting of disaster events in the Philippines, in the Maldives? And could Paul will launch the poll for us to check if it's yes or no?
Okay.
Yeah, if you have ever encountered issue of double counting of the disaster event reported in your country. Yeah.
Kita tak dengar kan?
Shasna, I think you turned on your mic already.
Yeah, I just want to add on that in the Maldives, actually, the disaster data is currently very weak. And the double counting it will happen, as it's not very much properly maintained at the moment, but as the NSO is currently not compiling the disaster statistics as such, that the disaster management authority is responsible for that, and they do share with us that it's currently being the double counts are done in, as it is not properly collected even from the islands at the island level as well. So they are currently working on improving the collection as well as, so as other countries mentioned, we need the UN ESCAP guidance on this very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shasna. Can we hear from Bhutan as well? We have colleagues from Bhutan. Sonam, have you ever encountered issues of the double counting in your disaster database? And how do you solve them if there were?
Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity. As far as I remember and I know, we have not faced any issue of double counting. But if I express my opinion, this could be dealt because two administrative falling in one hazardous area. If a committee could be formed immediately after disaster to do the data collection or respond to that, then that could be solved. That's what I feel.
Yeah, thanks. And quite similar to Nepal, I guess. Yeah, that they have a verification process. Although data collection can be collected, data can be collected by different concerns agencies, but at the end there would be a group that would verify the data. And I see in the chat as well that Professor, okay, let's see, we have the result of the poll. So we have some of the responses that, yeah, there might be some possible double counting. So five people responded, and one said no. Right, and also Professor Oban also shared that in terms of the hazard classification, there's a UNDRR, and we are partnering with UNDRR in terms of coming up with the new hazard information profiles that I think that might be a very good guidance document in terms of hazard classification going forward. And he kindly shared the link in the chat. So thank you very much. So, Mr. Chair, should we move to some of other questions? Or Mr. Moderator?
Okay, sure. We can move to the other question. Just to, what do you call it, to share it. At Malaysia, we are currently setting up a small committee, technical working group, to take, what do you call it, to involve few, the agency is, when you're talking about disaster statistic, it involve various agency in collecting data. So it's led by our National Disaster Agency Management, NADMA, and NSO is a secretariat, Department of Statistics Malaysia is a secretariat. So we are working on the small group, how we to collect the data and, you know, using DRSF as a framework. But it's still an early stage, and maybe we will get the engagement with the ESCAP later on. Thank you. So,
Thanks.
so we move on to the next question, I think, should be, I think regarding the, when we're talking about population background statistic and hazard exposure by geographic region, when I see it from the Nepal and Thailand, they already have what you call it, hazard risk Gs. But this will be very good if we can, what you call it, we map it with the population together inside that. But I think this is maybe, Terapon, maybe you want to explain further?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the background statistics, because I think one thing that we want to understand is that just even before a disaster occurs, we would from the planning perspective, we would like to make sure that we would particularly the disaster agencies colleagues would like to have basic information that they could use in their disaster planning, and those basic information includes definitely population and number of households and maybe other basic information that they would need, and those information would also be important for the response and rescue efforts once the disaster occur, so that they know how many people are in the area, and if they want to decide on the evacuation location, so where exactly would be safe, and that depending upon also number of population, households, roads that are connected. So those basic information are important for disaster planning. And if we hear from Nepal, for example, those basic information would come a lot of them would come from the NSO, and in Thailand, if I understand correctly, so there are several sources of population information. We have in Thailand that there's a definitely population census, but there are also population registers that could also provide the population figure as well. So in just wondering in other countries if the background statistics, if we focus on population, number of households, maybe income and GDP, are they really available, or are there still some of the challenges that you face in getting basic information?
Thank you, Terapon. I think Abano Farah Pelio, I think he put some in the message, like numbers imply identifying an event associated to the certain single hazard type, avoiding replication. I believe maybe anybody want to explain further, but this like number implies.
Yeah, maybe, Professor Urbano, would you like to explain the client number? I think many of us understand them, but maybe how are they used in practice as well?
Kun Pong, just to add, we also have Ms. Xiaomi from ADRC who also share with us the information on glide number as well. So Xiaomi, if you would like to also add something on this as well, you're more than welcome. Thank you for joining us today as well.
Hi, sorry. Thanks, Chair and presenters. Thank you very much for allowing me to explain about the situation. And as for GLIDE, it's rather the initiative proposed by the various multiple organizations, international or some regional organizations. So the classification of hazard or disasters are rather, how can I say, based on their recognition. So not strictly set the definitions or thresholds, because it's voluntarily. They, of course, there are some definitions of the hazard. However, there is no one standardized classification or thresholds at this moment. But I think this is why the GLIDE itself can be applied, how can I say, freely, or I mean, because more thresholds and more strict definitions, the more complexity we have. So in this moment, at this moment, GLIDE itself is planned to work as a kind of linkage or glue to connect disaster, I mean, events, information, as for in terms of figures, data, or some GIS or other information. And also at this moment, can I ask some questions? Yes, so listening to your presentations, I found some another points to be considered. That is the duration of counting damage or impacts of disaster. We discussed the duration of disaster itself, but also the duration of counting disaster, I mean taking statistics, also matters that the context of the contents of the statistics itself. For example, the loss damage information, structure or non-structure, it could take years to get the figures, amounts of the data. Also, some human damage or loss data. Some countries, they just release the direct loss. However, some countries, they continue following the changes of figures for years. So I think this issue also need to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Xiaomi. So if anybody else have a question or a thought, or like to share some their experience of their country, if not, Trapong, please.
Sorry, I just on the table A1 because we saw two experiences from Nepal and Thailand that are quite different in terms of reporting disaster by scale. Like in Nepal, currently there's no disaster report in terms of the scale of disaster. But while in Thailand, they do have some classification of the size of the disaster. I'm also wondering about other countries. From your knowledge, do you know if you in your country are the disaster events reported by scale, classified by scales?
Okay, the poll is there. And I think all maybe the participant can vote.
Okay, excuse me. May I say about classification of disaster in Bhutan? In Bhutan, the disaster is classified as type 1, type 2, and type 3, and it is based on the coping capacity of the administrative unit. So third level administrative, if they can cope within their resources, it is type 1. Then if it is beyond there, then next level administrative unit is involved, then it is type 2, then type 3. So it is based on the coping capacity of the administrative unit.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have colleagues from Indonesia as well. Which one? So in Indonesia, do you report disaster events by scale?
Okay. Thank you, Terapong. I will share it. Sorry, this is praying time in Indonesia. Maybe I will share later. Thank you.
Sure, and sorry for that, but we are glad to see you in the TWG.
So anybody else from the participant? If not, I will hand over back to Terapong for the next agenda. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Syed, and yeah, thanks for the moderation. I think it's very good to see different experiences and also understanding a little bit of the differences and similarities that we can learn from each other. And again, in terms of Nepal and Thailand, these are just because of the time limitation. These are the initial results that they prepared, and there are a lot more information. And yeah, we are going to continue working with Nepal and Thailand on this area. But moving forward, as the group agreed in the last meeting, that we are going to rotate the exercise to other countries for the next 2 tables, which is as we focus on exposure mainly, and that so just want to open the floor if any country would like to volunteer themselves for the next round, and again, I think Thailand and Nepal can say better that in fact it doesn't take a lot of time requirement. Is really the collaboration with the agencies, other agencies, and really understanding the table, and we always work together over the last 2 months. So the next 2 tables, wondering if any country would like to volunteer. Maybe what I should do is I can read out the name of the next 2 tables so that we know what they are. Paul, do you have them open somewhere?
I do. Let me post it in the chat. It's gonna be B1B and B2, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And already got volunteer from the Philippines. Thanks, Virginia. I look forward to working with the Philippines again.
Yes, Mr. Terapo, I think this is okay with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian.
Because disaster is very close to our heart. That's why anything that any initiative, we wanted to welcome them all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And well, in interest of time, I'm sure other countries would also consider. And I may I propose that I would reach out. Okay, Riona.
Actually, to your point, yes, I've just discussed quickly with this National Statistical Office of Mongolia, and then yeah, Mongolia could do that together with the Philippines. Yes, for the next.
Okay, that's just excellent. Thank you so much. Ridwan.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I will share a little bit Indonesian experience related to that issues. The first one related to the baseline data for the risk before disaster event. Indonesia, we conduct what we call risk assessment. The baseline using from the statistical bureau as population data and vulnerable group data, but we know all the demography data is not based on the spatial data. That the problem what we have done in Indonesia. If possible, I will share a screen.
Yeah, if it quite because we are running out of the time, but yes, as if it's just a few minutes.
Okay.
Are you able to share your screen?
Right now, share already.
I haven't seen your screen.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's coming. Yep.
Okay. This is the simple. We start with the risk assessment. Let's say Indonesian administrative level, they have 4 level: provincial, district level, sub-district level, and village level. The statistical data provided by Bureau Statistic, the data based on the tabular data, but the risk itself is not cover all the administrative risk, depend on the disaster itself. I will sample let's one area in here. Let's say okay, I try to continue the sample. Let's say one sample in here. Okay, this is one district, administrative boundaries. And then when we integrate it with hazard, the hazard itself is not administrative boundaries. Let's say I take one sample is flood. This is the potential flood in that area. And then the population data, based on the statistical, we try to develop what we call population density spatial base. This is not based on administrative boundaries, but based on spatial density population. We try calculate the population exposed by the hazard in that district. The system automatically calculate in here number of infrastructure and also the population, potential loss, and so on. This one sample number of population exposed by flood in that district. Based on this data, we using the risk assessment for the develop what we call disaster management plan. But for the disaster event itself, it's not directly to district or administrative boundary area, but they have several land administrative boundaries. In Indonesia, for these issues, for the big disaster event, we using glide, let's say glide number is for the disaster code. For the planning itself, government needs the impact data based on administrative boundaries. But for the event itself, we need a special code for the make sure the report is not overlap in the disaster event. For the small scale disaster, we didn't use the glide number because the small scales we didn't request a glide number, but we using own Indonesian disaster code. If we collect the data in the sub-district level, that means the code based on sub-district, if they have 3 or 4 sub-district by the disaster event, they have 4 data card, but the code itself is only 1 code that we can calculate number of event based on number of data card. For the report itself, we developed to what we call the Indonesian disaster and information database. This is the data based on administrative boundaries. After the government sub-national level validate the data collection and then input to the system, we can monitor the data through this website. For the disaster scale, in Indonesia, we basically we have what we call the lower scale is responsibility by district level, and then the provincial level to support district level as needed, and also the national level. If disaster event coverage more than 1 district, the disaster led by high level in that area, that means provincial level. If disaster event impact more than 2 or 3 district and difficult to handle by sub-national and national support to handle that disaster, become of national scale disaster. This is one of sample in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thanks, Ridwan, and always good to get insights on. I would consider good practices in managing this disaster data for Indonesia, and yeah, we would love to hear more from other countries as well. But yeah, in interest of time, maybe I think is approaching the closing session, so I would hand this over back to Aruna.
Thank you, Tirapong. And then, as we all know that we run out of time, just before closing the today's meeting, I just would like to briefly share about the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which was held last month in Brisbane. And then I'm sure that many of you already participated, and then I personally met with Ricky, and then of course our advisor Puji Pujana in there. So one of the main events was the Sendai Framework midterm review, and then they discussed about share the challenges and then their good practices, and then also they introduced the way forward. And then during the session, countries share the best practices, challenges, gaps for the implementation of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and the main challenges and gaps are related to the disaster-related statistics, disaster data, and especially such as like a data recording, analysis, handling with all these data, and of course availabilities, and also roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders. And yeah. Also, there were a couple of sessions for disaster-related statistics, like disaggregated data, country diagnostics, and leaving no one behind. Also, we had a partner event, which Puji Pujano was one of the organizers. And then I was one of the panelists of that session, and then I shared about our technical working group, what we are doing, what we did in the past, and then what we aim to do in the future, and then etc. And then one of my personal takeaways from the conference is that without reliable and then accurate disaster data or disaster-related statistics, we couldn't achieve these global targets on disaster risk reduction, sustainable development goals, and then also climate change adaptations. So I believe it's really important for us to strengthen our capacity, for example, by applying this disaster-related statistical framework and reviewing all the tables that our UN Secretary offers for these member countries. So I believe that for our next sessions, during our next sessions, Ricky and then Puji will share their reflections from this Brisbane's conference. So with that, before declaring this meeting closed, I would like to ask UN Secretariat.
Aruna, this is Puji.
Yes.
Yeah, Puji, sorry, we don't really have time. Okay, can you keep your best next time?
No, just say hello, just to say that I wish I would be here, but I cannot. Just that one. Yeah. Thank you.
Hopefully, Puji and Ricky, we will allocate time during our next meeting. Yes, and then you can share. So before this meeting declared closed, I would like to ask our secretary, is there any housekeeping announcements? Yeah, and then after that, yes, we will discuss about the next meeting.
Exactly, is actually the timing, the date of the next meeting. Thanks, Aruna. And we have we agree to hold this meeting every 2 months, but if we count the next 2 months would be Xmas, and we don't perhaps want to separate our Xmas in the Zoom call or Teams call. So we put on 2 proposals, and Kunpo, can you launch the poll? So it's either we do it slightly before Christmas or in January. So and yeah, 14 December. So that leaves us, let's say, 1.5 months for the volunteer country to work with ESCAP, or we do it like the next 3 months. So please choose your preference choice on the poll, and then we can make decision based on that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tirapong. So I highly encourage our members to actively participate in the poll, and then choose the appropriate date for you for our next meeting. With that, I would like to declare this meeting closed, and then thank you again for your time, and then see you before the Christmas or after the Christmas. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.